Here are the 2021 judges: the T.S. Eliot Prize-winning poet Roger Robinson, the Irish writer, editor and broadcaster Sinéad Gleeson, and the novelist and short story writer John McGregor, to tell you more.
Hey John, hey Sinead.
Hey Roger.
Are you guys all right?
Pretty good, pretty good.
Nice. One of the things that struck me about the reading of all the books, the 80 books, was the nonfiction. And how nonfiction, I mean, I used to read some nonfiction. I was never a big nonfiction reader, but I used to read nonfiction back in the day. But it was always about nonfiction, for me, was a lot about getting the information over and trying to inform you and keep you well informed. Now nonfiction to me seems like rock and roll. You know, it seems like, wow, some of the best stories being told in nonfiction. I mean, told in the most innovative ways, far more innovative than I think than novels or poetry. You know, that was a shocker for me. You know.
Yeah, I think I was shortlisted for the prize last year, and it's one of the few prizes where that allows nonfiction to compete alongside novels and short stories. Is one of the things I love about the prize. You get all these multiple forms and genres of work, you know, poetry, short stories, nonfiction, memoir, all in the same kind of race. And I think that nonfiction itself has changed than what it used to be. People used to think it was either biography or history or memoir, and there's loads of in between bits for what that is now. And we saw a lot of it on this long list and short list this year.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm going to stick up for fiction.
Yeah.
Sorry, Roger, I'm going to stick up for fiction just a little bit. I think there was some really innovative, exciting fiction on the list of books that we read this year,
right?
As well.
Yeah.
But you're right. That there was, what I really loved about judging this prize was to kind of read above the categories, and just I was looking for excitement. I was looking for freshness. I was looking for story, but in a much bigger sense than just fiction. And it was there, yeah, all through the list.
Yeah, I mean, I get the sense that people are really trying to reach for new ways to show you things in the fiction, in the poetry, and in the nonfiction. It's like the forms are so, you know, they were so sometimes peculiar, sometimes idiosyncratic, but sometimes you're just like, wow, I don't think I'll ever see that thing the same way again. And so everybody's trying to find new ways to let you see a story as opposed to just telling you the story. And I found that really interesting in the 80 books. I find when I was reading, there are some books that like, okay, I'm going to give this book 1.5 days. And I read it, and you said something else, John, and like 2 weeks later, you're still reading it and you're like, you don't want to stop and put it down. And it's like, well, when a book grips you like that, you're like, wow, this is a really good book, you know? And of course, they had the opposite way. I was like, oh, this is going to be great. It's like, man, this is a complete disappointment. You know, it's like whatever you think before you start the book is something completely, it ended up being something completely different for me, you know?
Yeah, and I did wonder with a few books, so the thing I love about this prize as well is the way that you know, the books we read are all nominated by the other writers in the Academy.
Yeah, for sure.
And so every time I picked up a book, I was like, this is somebody else's favorite book of the year, you know. And
yes.
So that kind of gives it this presence, and then sometimes it doesn't connect, you know. And it's not always the fault of the book. It just sometimes it doesn't work for you. I don't know.
I think that's one of the joys of the prize as well. The fact that every year I kind of make a dash for those end of year lists to see what other writers have been recommending and reading. And this way we got to see that. We got to see what writers were reading. And it's always a kind of joy. People surprise you what turns up on lists like this. And I think something you said, Roger, a lot of the poetry that we saw this year was often quite experimental, often extremely current and reactive to things that are going on in the world at the moment. So they felt really vital and really kind of fizzy and energetic in many ways. And that was one of the things. A lot of the poetry this year really, really impressed me.
Mm-hmm. What was also interesting for me is that how sometimes I trust my instincts and I'd be like, no, I think this is really good. And then one of you would be the specialist and say, okay, let me explain to you why this really isn't good. and I'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, I actually think I'm going to go with the specialist on this one. You know, it's like how not quickly I was turned around, but how the analysis of the craft was a particularly important part in it, not just enjoyment, not just, as John put one in one email, not just the books that you want for your birthday. It's just like, okay, is this book talking to people, but is it talking to craft? Is it trying to do new things with story? What is it trying to do in the kind of current environment now, you know? So that was cool for me.
But I think the fact that the prize allows so many different types of books into it, that's where we know that our job is one job, which is to pick the best book. And
Sure.
often, you know, you can't necessarily compare narrative in poetry and narrative in nonfiction or narrative in novels. So it's just which is the book that moved us, that enthralled us, that we thought was better than all the other books. And that's been really exciting. You judge it, you know, an all fiction prize or an all poetry prize in a completely different way. So I loved that.
Yeah. But also the diversity of our opinions, and also how similar some of our opinions were. That was at times scary for me. I'm like, wow, you know, certain books that we all chose, and they were all quite high up. I was like, well, we have some very different backgrounds. How did that happen? You know, what is it about that, and how universal a book may or may not be? You know.
Because we have excellent taste and are very discerning.
Of course. Impeccable, excellent taste. Yeah.
It's gonna get tasty though, isn't it? With the when we go from the shortlist to a winner. I think so far there's been a really nice kind of overlapping of our specialisms and our interests and our taste and you know, and the consensus has been, that's been quite exciting to see. But I suspect when we have our final discussion that's picking a single winner out of this fantastic shortlist of books is going to be really difficult.